Guardians. However, Albedo continued speaking in a high and clear voice as she delivered her report to Momonga. With the exception of the 4th floor Guardian Gargantua and the 8th floor Guardian Victim, all the floor Guardians are gathered before you. Thus do we offer up our utmost loyalty to the Master. Momonga could not speak as he looked at the 6 lowered heads before him. A strange pressure veiled the entire area, and perhaps only Momonga could bear the painful, crushing air. He did not know how to proceed. He had never seen anything like this before in his life. In his confusion, Momonga accidentally activated a skill. A dreadful aura roiled out over the surroundings, and a halo of black radiance formed behind him. Momonga had no time to cancel the skill as he frantically racked his brains to recall a scene from movies or television which would tell him how to respond appropriately here. Raise your heads. With a shah, everyone raised their heads. Their coordination was so immaculate that Momonga wondered if they had practiced that movement together. Then, first, I thank all of you for coming here. There is no need for thanks. We are all Momonga-sama's loyal subordinates. To us, Momonga-sama is our supreme overlord. None of the guardians opposed her statement. As expected of the guardian overseer, Momonga looked on the guardians with a stern face, and he felt a choking sensation in his non-existent throat. It was the weight of being a leader bearing down on him. In addition, any orders he gave now would affect his relationship with them in the future. He could not help but hesitate as he contemplated the possibilities. Would he lead the great tomb of Nazarick to destruction because of his decisions? The unease generated by that thought flooded his heart and mind. Momonga-sama, it is only natural that you should have doubts about us. After all, our abilities must be minuscule in your reckoning. Albedo removed the smile from her face, and continued in a respectful tone that was laced with a stern strength. However, if Momonga-sama gives the order, all the guardians will accomplish any task set to us, no matter how difficult or arduous, with every fiber of our beings. We hereby swear that we will never allow the 41 supreme beings of Ain Zulgaun, our creators, to be disgraced by our actions. This we swear. The floor guardians chimed in right after Albedo. Their voices were filled with power, and that adamant loyalty and determination would not be diminished by any number of foes. It was as though they were mocking Momonga's previous worries that the NPCs might betray him. The darkness in his heart vanished like shadows in the morning sun. Momonga was moved to the bottom of his heart that the NPCs, designed by the members of Ain Zulgaun, were possessed by such excellence. The golden radiance of the past still remained. The embodiment of everyone's hard work, their cunningly crafted creations, were still here. It filled him with joy. Momonga smiled, although his skeletal face could not display any emotions. The points of crimson light in his eye sockets seemed to shine exceptionally bright. His prior unease head was no longer existent, and he simply spoke the words expected of a guildmaster. Excellent. Guardians, I know that you will understand my aims and successfully carry out my commands. There may be some things which are difficult to understand, but I hope you will pay attention and listen. I believe the great underground tomb of Nazarick has been caught up in some kind of unknown situation. The guardians' faces were still stern, and there was no trace of surprise on them. Although I do not know what has caused this incident, the great tomb of Nazarick has been transported from its place in the swamps to a vast plain. Did anyone foresee the occurrence of this strange event? Albedo looked back at the guardians, and after seeing the reply written on their face, she said, regretfully, none of us have any idea of what is going on. Then, I have a question for the floor guardians. Have any of you discovered anything strange in your floors? After hearing this, each floor guardian responded, there are no abnormalities in the 7th floor. Same with the 6th floor. It's as Nachon says. The 5th floor island. The same. Nothing strange has been sighted in the 1st to 3rd floors. Momonga-sama, I shall investigate the 4th and 8th floors right away. Then, I will leave that matter to Albedo. However, you must be careful on the 8th floor. If an emergency situation occurs there, a situation may emerge that you cannot deal with. Albedo bowed her head deeply to indicate she understood, and then Shelter said, then, I shall handle matters on the surface. There is no need. Sabas is currently reconnoitering the surface. Surprise flashed across the faces of Albedo and the other guardians. In the great underground tomb of Nazarick, there were 4 NPCs who were exponents of melee combat. Cositas had the strongest attack power when using a weapon, Albedo had an impregnable defense when in her heavy armor, while Sabas in his true form was stronger than either of them in melee combat. And then was one more, who was superior to all of them. There could be no other reason for the Guardian's surprise. Sabas, who could sweep away anyone before him in hand-to-hand combat, had been assigned to the simple task of reconnaissance. They could tell how seriously Momonga was taking this strange occurrence, and everyone was on their guard as a result. It's about time for him to return. Just then, Momonga saw Sabas jogging over to them, until he reached the Guardians genuflecting before Momonga and went to one knee as well. Momonga-sama, forgive my lateness. It's fine. Then, your report on the surrounding conditions. Sabas raised his head and looked around at the Guardians kneeling beside him. The situation is critical, so obviously the floor Guardians need to know as well. Yes. To begin with, the terrain surrounding us for a kilometer in each direction is a plain. There are no signs of man-made structures. I spotted some small animals, but there were no humanoid or large creatures. Were those small animals monsters? No, they were life forms which had no combat power. I see. Then, were the plains you spoke of covered in frozen grass, which would cut you as you passed them? No, it was simple grass. There was nothing special about it. And you did not see any sky castles or similar buildings? No, I did not. There was no sign of man-made illumination in the sky or on the land. I see, so there was only a starry sky. Thank you for your hard work, Sabas. As he praised Sabas for his efforts, Momonga was somewhat disappointed because he had not obtained any useful information. However, he was slowly realizing that he was no longer in the game world of Yggdrasil, although he did not understand why he could use Yggdrasil's equipment and use its spells. He did not know why they had come here, but it would be wise to heighten Nazarik's combat readiness just in case. For all he knew, this might be someone else's territory, and he might be censured for having come here without permission. No, he would be lucky if that was all that happened. Guardians, increase the readiness of each floor by 1 level. We are unsure of what has happened, so do not act incautiously. If you encounter an intruder, do not slay them, but capture them alive at all costs. When you capture them, do as little harm to them as possible. I apologize for imposing such demands on all of you at a time like this. The Guardians voiced their acknowledgement and nodded in unison. Next, I would like to understand the administrative operations of the tomb. Albedo, how is the exchange of security information between the Guardians of the various floors? In Yggdrasil, the Guardians were simple NPCs, and they could only act according to their programs. There was no way the floors would exchange security information and monsters. Each floor is administered by its respective floor Guardian, but Demiurge is the overall defense commander, and everyone can share information with him. Momonga was a bit surprised, but then he nodded in satisfaction. Excellent. Nazarik's defense commander, Demiurge, Guardian, Overseer, Albedo. The two of you will be in charge of drawing up a more comprehensive administrative system for Nazarik. Understood. Will the plans for the management system include the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors? The 8th floor is managed by Victim, so it'll be fine. No, entry to the 8th floor is forbidden. I rescind the order I just gave to Albedo as well. In short, entry to the 8th floor will only be effected with my permission. I will undo the seal and permit direct access from the 7th floor to the 9th floor. After that, plan for the 9th and 10th floor as one whole. Is that your will? Albedo seemed quite surprised. Behind her, Demiurge's eyes went wide, revealing his thoughts on the matter. Will the underlings be allowed to tramp through the domain of the supreme beings? Must they be given that much freedom? The underlings in question were not the NPCs and monsters designed by the members of Ain Zulgaun, but the automatically spawned, monsters from the dungeon. The fact was that the 9th and 10th floor lacked such monsters, barring very rare exceptions. Momonga muttered to himself. Albedo seemed to regard that place as a holy sanctuary, but that was not the case. The reason why there were no monsters on the 9th floor was simply because if any intruders could overcome the NPC defenders of the 8th floor, the most powerful beings in the tomb, then Ain Zulgaun's chances of victory would be slim. Thus, it would be better to play the role of a villain to the hilt, and meet the invaders in the throne room for a final showdown. It will be fine. Because it's an emergency, we need extra hands for security. Understood. I shall select only the finest and most potent troops for this duty. Momonga nodded, and looked toward the twins. Aura and Mare, can you conceal the great underground tomb of Nazarik? Simple illusions don't seem very reliable, and thinking about the cost of illusions gives me a headache. Aura and Mare looked at each other and began thinking. After a while, Mare spoke up. using magic might be tricky. If we had to hide everything along with the surface, although, we could cover the walls in mud, and then add plants as camouflage. Do you intend to soil the glorious walls of Nazarick with base dirt? Albedo said that with her back turned to Mare. Although her voice was sweet and velvet, the tone it carried was anything but. Mare's shoulders trembled, and although the surrounding guardians remained silent, their attitudes suggested that they shared Albedo's opinion. In contrast, Momonga felt Albedo was being too much of a busybody. The situation was hardly serious enough to warrant such a reaction. Albedo, don't speak out of turn. I am addressing Mare. His voice was so deep that it surprised Momonga himself. Ah, my deepest apologies, Momonga-sama. Albedo's head was as low as it could go, and her face was frozen in fear. The guardians and Sabas stiffened up as well. Perhaps they thought that scolding was directed at them as well. A twinge of remorse struck Momonga as he observed the quick change in the guardian's attitude, but he continued speaking to Mare. Can you conceal the walls by heaping dirt onto them? Yes, I can, if you allow it, Momonga-sama. However, yes, an observer from a distance would think the ground was bulging up unnaturally. Sabas, are there any nearby hills, or the like? There are none. Regretfully, we are surrounded by flatlands. However, since there are nights here, we should be able to perform some sort of eye-deceiving camouflage while the sun is down. Is that so? If all we intend to do is hide the walls, Mare's idea will be enough. Then, what if we piled up the dirt from the nearby land to make dummy hills as camouflage? Then, we would blend in. Very well. I shall assign Nora and Mare to carry out this task together. While doing so, you may draw the necessary supplies from each floor. Since we cannot camouflage the view from the air, we shall use illusions after finishing the earthworks, so nobody will be able to detect Nazarick from the outside. Why yes, you understood. That was all he could think of at the moment. There were probably a lot of holes left in the plan, but that could be dealt with slowly, later on. After all, it had only been a few hours since all this had happened. Then, you are dismissed for today. Everyone, take a break before beginning your duties. There are many things we do not know, so do not push yourselves too hard. The guardians nodded as one to show that they understood. Finally, I have a question for the guardians. To begin with, Shaltir, what kind of person am I to you? An incarnation of beauty. You are the most beautiful person in the world. Even jewels pale in comparison to your snow-white body. Shaltir did not pause to think about her answer before she gave it. From the lack of delay in her reply, she must have been speaking from the heart. Cositus. 1. Who? Island. Mightier than all the guardians, and deserving of the title of the Supreme Overlord of the Great Underground Tomb of Nazarick, Aura, a merciful leader with great foresight. Mare, a very gentle person. Demiurge, a wise leader who makes decisions and acts on them quickly. Truly, a man worthy of the title inscrutable. Sabas, the one responsible for assembling all the supreme beings. In addition, the merciful leader who did not abandon us, but stayed by our side until the very end. And finally, Albedo, the man who rules over the supreme beings, and our highest, most exalted master. In addition, the man I love most deeply. I see. I have heard and understand your opinions. Then, I shall hand the tasks that were once performed by my former comrades to you. Carry them out faithfully. After seeing the guardians genuflect once more, Momonga teleported away. The scenery before his eyes changed in an instant, from the Colosseum to the chamber of the golems of Lemagitan. After looking around to make sure nobody was looking, Momonga sighed deeply. I'm so tired. Although his body did not feel tired, the mental fatigue was weighing down on his shoulders. Those guys, why do they think so highly of me? They were describing someone else entirely. After hearing the guardians take turns to share their opinions of him, he wanted to laugh and mock them, but from the looks on their faces, it did not sound like they were joking at all. In other words, their words were sincere. If he did not act in a manner which fit their views of him, it might disappoint them. As he thought about that, the pressure on him grew and grew. And in addition to that, there was another problem, which made Momonga frown. Of course, his skeletal face could not show expressions, yet it seemed as though it did. What should I do about Albedo? If this keeps up, how will I face Tabula-san? Intermission. The pressure crushing their heads to the ground suddenly vanished. Even after the departure of the master of their revered creators, Nobody raised their heads. After a while, someone sighed in relief. The tense atmosphere was gone now. The first to get up was Albedo. Her white dress was stained where her knee had touched the ground, but she did not mind at all. She flapped her wings to swipe off the dirt on her feathers. After seeing Albedo rise, the others followed suit, though nobody dared to speak. That was scary, Nei-chan. Yeah, I thought I'd be squashed flat. As expected of Momonga-sama, to think his presence would have such a great effect on us floor guardians, as a supreme being, his might overmatches ours, but I did not expect him to be this powerful. Thus the guardians shared their impressions of Momonga. The aura that Momonga emitted was the source of the power that had crushed the guardians to the ground. Despair aura. Besides inflicting a fear effect, it could reduce the stats of its victims. Normally, it would not have an effect on the level 100 NPCs, but on this occasion, its effects had been strengthened by the staff of Ain Zulgaon. Momonga-sama must have unleashed the air of authority that represents his right to rule. Indeed, before we stated our positions, Momonga-sama did not exert his might. However, once we showed ourselves in the role of floor guardians, he must have revealed a fraction of his awesome power to us. In other words, Momonga-sama revealed his true ability as a ruler. In response to our pledges of loyalty. That does seem like the case. He didn't radiate that aura when he was with us. Momonga-sama was kind, and gave us something to drink when we were thirsty. Aura's words caused the other guardians to emit an air of tension. It was condensed jealousy that was almost visible to the naked eye. The worst off was Albedo. Her clenched fists shuddered and her nails threatened to rip through the fabric of her gloves. Mare's shoulders trembled, and then his eyes went wide. That must have been the true power of Momonga-sama, the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick. It was amazing. That changed the mood instantly. Exactly. He showed us his ability as an absolute ruler in response to our feelings, as expected of our creator. The zenith of the 41 supreme beings, and the kind master who remained here with us until the very end. Albedo's words put a blissful look on all the guardians' faces, although the expression on Mare's face was better described as relaxed. There was nothing which could delight them more than the master who created them, the master to whom they owed their utmost loyalty, revealing his true face to them. The guardians, no, every entity created by the supreme beings wanted nothing more than to aid their creators in some way. The next best thing would be to receive their trust and to be treated as useful servants. This was a simple, natural truth. This was the greatest joy in life for these characters who were created to aid the supreme beings. Then, as though to wipe away this jubilant atmosphere, Sabas said from the side, "Then, I shall take my leave first. I do not know where Momonga-sama has gone, but I should stay by his side." Jealousy was written all over Albedo's face, but she quashed her feelings and replied, "I understand." Then, Sabas, serve Momonga-sama well and do not disgrace him. Report to me if anything happens. In particular, if Momonga-sama summons me, you must let me know immediately. Everything else is of secondary importance to that. A pained expression crossed Demiurge's face as he listened quietly from the side. But if he desires me in his bedchamber, you must inform Momonga-sama that I might be a while, in order to bathe and cleanse myself for him. Of course, if he wants me to proceed to him immediately, that is fine as well. After all, I do my best to keep clean for him, and my clothes have already been selected so I can heed his call whenever it comes. In any case, Momonga-sama's wishes will always come first. I understand, Albedo. If I waste too much time here, I will not have enough to properly serve Momonga-sama, which would be disrespectful. Therefore, forgive my abrupt departure, but I must take my leave. Floor guardians, I bid you all a good day. After saying his farewells to the wide-eyed and open-mouthed guardians, Sabas immediately jogged away, as though to leave Albedo, who was preparing for a long monologue, behind. Speaking of which, it is fairly quiet around here. Shaltir, is something the matter? After Demiurge's question, everyone's eyes went to Shaltir. She was still on her knees. What? Island? Wrong. Shaltir? She lifted her head after she was called on again. The dazed look on her face would make people think that she had just been woken up. What happened? After being exposed to Momonga-sama's awesome presence, I could not help but get excited. I fear my underwear has gone through a bit of a crisis. Silence. Everyone looked at each other, unsure of what to say. The guardians mused that Shelter had, by far, the most fetishes among them, and that one of said fetishes was necrophilia. They facepalmed as they thought about this, although Mare didn't quite get it and was thoroughly confused. No, one of the guardians was not content to simply shake her head and sigh. That was Albedo. The jealousy surging in her made Albedo come out and say, "You slut." Shelter sensed Albedo's hostility as she heard those scornful words. Her lips curled in hostility, and she responded, with a bewitching smile. "What? Having Mamanga-sama, the most beautiful of the supreme beings, bless us with his energy is a reward. Anyone who doesn't get wet from that must have something wrong in their head. Or could it be that you don't just look pure, but you don't have any fleshly desires at all, you big-mouthed gorilla? You lamprey." The two of them glared at each other. The guardians did not know if they would fight as a result of this, but the way they were looking at each other was very unsettling. "My appearance was created by the supreme beings. Are you unhappy with it? Shouldn't that be my line?" Shelter slowly stood back up, and the two of them approached each other. Even so, their eyes remained locked. Eventually, the two of them came so close that they collided into each other. "Don't think you've won just because you're the guardian overseer and can stay next to Mamanga-sama. If you really think that way, I'll laugh my ass off." "Humph. That's correct. While you're stationed in a faraway place, I'll swoop in and achieve a complete victory." "What do you mean by a complete victory? Teach me, Guardian Overseer-sama." As a slut, you should be fully aware of what that means. Throughout their trade of verbal barbs, neither of them had turned their gaze from each other. They simply looked into each other's eyes with a blank expression on their faces. With a pasha, Albedo unfurled her wings in a threat display. Black mist wreathed Shelter as she responded in kind, unwilling to admit weakness. "Ah, Aura, matters between women should be settled by a fellow woman. If anything happens I'll come to help. Let me know when the time comes, all right? Hey, wait, Demiurge. Are you planning to dump all of this on me?" Demiurge simply waved lazily as he walked away from the feuding pair. Cocytus and Mare took a step back as well. Nobody wanted to get caught between them. Really, do they have to argue over this sort of thing? Personally, I would be quite interested in the result. "What do you mean by the result, Demiurge?" "I refer to the increase in our fighting power, the future of Nazarick, and so on." "Demiurge, what do you mean?" Demiurge pondered how he should answer Mare's question. For a moment, an evil impulse swept through Demiurge's head and he thought of infusing the simple Mare with adult knowledge, but he promptly discarded that line of thinking. Demiurge was a devil, and he was cruel and ruthless, but that only applied to people outside Nazarick. To Demiurge, the characters made by the 41 supreme beings were his comrades. Any great leader requires a successor. No, Mamanga-sama may have stayed with us until the end, but if he loses interest in us one day, he may leave for another place like the rest of the supreme beings. Thus, there is a need for a successor to whom we can pledge our loyalty. I see. Then, which of us will be Mamanga-sama's successor? How disrespectful. As guardians, we are to serve Mamanga-sama faithfully, so he may stay that island. What we were made for. Demiurge turned to the interrupting Cocytus. "Of course I understand that, Cocytus. But do you not wish to pledge your loyalty to Mamanga-sama's heir?" Of course, I would like to swear my allegiance to Mamanga-sama's heir." Cocytus began imagining himself running around with said heir on his shoulders. Then he began to imagine himself teaching him swordsmanship, drawing his blade to defend the young master, and even hearing the full-grown young master giving him orders. Oh, how wonderful! What a glorious sight! Uncle, uncle! Somewhat unable to bear it, Demiurge averted his eyes from Cocytus, who was fully into imagining himself as a cool old uncle, faithfully serving Mamanga's heir. "Well, that aside, I'm quite interested in knowing what our children can do for the strengthening of the great underground tomb of Nazarick. How about it, Mare, do you want to make a child? Still, you don't have a partner. If you discover any humans, dark elves, wood elves, or similar species, would you kindly capture them for me?" After thinking for a bit, Mare nodded and said, if it helps Mamanga-sama, I'm willing to contribute. But how will I have children? Well, I'll teach you about that when the time comes. But if you decide to try some breeding experiments on your own, Mamanga-sama might scold you. After all, the operations of Nazarick are perfectly balanced. That's true. I've heard that all the underlings were created after careful calculation by one of the supreme beings. If we carelessly increase our numbers, we'll be scolded. I don't want to be scolded by Mamanga-sama. Of course, I don't want to be rebuked by the supreme beings either. If only I could set up a farm outside Nazarick. As Demiurge thought of this, he decided to mention the one thing nobody had teased him about. Ah yes, Mare, why are you dressed as a girl? Mare grabbed at his miniskirt to hide his legs after Demiurge asked his question. This was Bukabukagama-sama's decision. She said this was called a trap, so it should have nothing to do with my gender. Oh, so this was Bukabukagama-sama's decision. Well then, those clothes should be fine on you, although, should all boys dress in that way? I don't know about that. The 41 supreme beings were no longer around, but even so, the mention of their names still compelled obedience. Or rather, in the great underground tomb of Nazarick, Mare was dressed as he should be, and nobody apart from another supreme being could change his wardrobe. I wonder if I should talk to Mamanga-sama about this. Perhaps all boys should be dressed like that. I say, Cositus, it's time to wake up. After hearing his colleague's words, Cositus shook his head several times, a deeply satisfied smile on his face. Ah, what a beautiful sight. Truly, it was everything I have ever dreamed of. Is that so? Well then, that's good. Are Albedo and Shelter still fighting? The feuding pair's eyes were slightly averted. However, the one that answered Demiurge was the tired-looking Aura, standing by the side. They're done. Right now, they're arguing about the problem of who should be the first wife. It would be strange for the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick to only have one wife. The question now is who is worthy of being Mamanga-sama's first wife. While that is quite an interesting question, we should probably discuss that later. Alright, Albedo, won't you give us our orders? There will be many things to do later on. Indeed, you're right. I need to issue orders soon. Shelter, I'll discuss this matter with you at length soon enough. We'll need to spend some time on it. I have no objections, Albedo. No other matter is more worthy of our time. Very well. Then, let us move on to our plans for the future. After seeing Albedo recover her dignity as the Guardian Overseer, all the floor guardians lowered their heads in respect. However, they did not genuflect. Of course, they had to show their respect to the Guardian Overseer Albedo, but she was not their master. While the 41 supreme beings had set her over all the other characters that they had created, but even the position of Guardian Overseer was merely one set down by the 41 supreme beings, and as such the other guardians needed only to pay her the respect due to her station. Thus, they lowered their heads to her. On her part, Albedo was not angry at this, because she knew that was the most correct course of action. Firstly, clone. New paste. Few persons can be made to believe that it is not quite an easy thing to invent a method of secret writing which shall baffle investigation. Yet it may be roundly asserted that human ingenuity cannot concoct a cipher which human ingenuity cannot resolve. Edgar Allan Poe. 182,975 pastes opened. Based on an original idea from SebSavage.net Sam and Max.